What's up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be reacting to another video from a much more popular than I am YouTuber. It's a YouTube channel called How Money Works, and the video is called The Overdue Collapse of Short-Term Rentals. Now, I haven't watched this video yet. I wanted to save it to react to it live on this video here, and I just want to share my thoughts because, as always, there's a lot of people speculating around what's going on with the Airbnb market. I suspect, I don't know much about this channel or much about their background, but I thought it'd be an interesting watch. And there's a lot of people that are kind of panicking, talking about the collapse of Airbnb, talking about Airbnb bust. And I just want to watch this video with you guys to share my reaction, my honest thoughts on what's being discussed in this video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's jump right into it. And yeah, let's just see what's going on in the video here.
Short-term rentals are a $100 billion market that have reshaped global tourism, accelerated a nationwide housing crisis, and created fortunes for early adopters. But now, customers, the government, the public, and the hosts themselves are turning their back on a concept that started out as a fun alternative to stuffy hotel chains, but became everything wrong with modern real estate.
Okay, so right off the bat, I think that there's a lot of exaggeration happening here, a lot of hyperbole. Saying that short-term rentals or Airbnb is everything wrong with modern real estate is absolute insanity. Like, obviously that is baseless. There's nothing that you could say that could convince me that Airbnb or short-term rentals is everything that's wrong with modern real estate. How about the crazy high housing prices due to a real lack of additional supply, inflow of demand? How about the crazy high interest rates? How about like all of these problems? There's so many problems that are like way bigger than just the use of properties as short-term rentals. To say that it's everything wrong with modern real estate when, like, for example, real estate agents can do a blind bidding process, and like there's just all these different problems with modern real estate, and to say that short-term rentals are everything that's wrong with it is absolutely crazy. But let's carry on in the video here.
Parties over for Airbnb renters. The company said yesterday that its temporary ban on parties and other large noisy events is now permanent.
I've put all my savings into my unit. I'm following all the rules, paying all the taxes, buying the business license.
Ultimately, our goal is to get more housing.
So again, this is just already the way all of this media is being positioned. It's like the party is over for Airbnb, and he's talking about how you're not allowed to have parties at an Airbnb anymore. That doesn't mean that Airbnb is suffering. It means people can't host parties, which is amazing. It's incredible. It's actually helped tremendously for hosts that they banned parties, because now parties are way less of an issue, and they were always a big issue, whether you're investing, managing properties, whatever. And that lady talked about how she put all her money into it. Like, that's just one person that put a bunch of money into it, and she doesn't even say whether it's doing well or not for her. And even if it's doing poorly, that's not a problem with Airbnb, that's a problem with her. But anyway, let's carry on. I just always like to point out these biases that are being snuck into videos, especially when you do like news clips all in a row like this, where you're mashing them together and trying to paint a narrative, but all these clips are lacking context, so you don't even know what's actually being talked about here.
Back into the housing market for people to be able to rent.
I just uncovered a massive amount of debt that Airbnb hasn't paid on the books that they're hiding. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions, possibly even $1 billion plus of debt that they have not paid.
So we are looking around and are saying, what can we do right away that makes more homes available?
The short-term rental market.
I was wondering if this YouTuber is Canadian. I haven't looked into it, but a lot of those clips are from like Global and CTV and whatnot. And real estate is totally screwed up in Canada, largely because we take in a lot of immigration, which is great. We have a huge growing population, but we don't have the growth in supply of housing to match that because of systemic issues like just zoning issues, new building issues. Like, it's just impossible and challenging to build new inventory because of all the bureaucratic red tape. And so because of that, we have all this demand, not enough new supply, and skyrocketing housing crisis. So yes, I mean, trying to pin that all on short-term rental is crazy. And I just want to reiterate again, like, all of those clips lacked any kind of context. This is like very much just like kind of scare tactic media, but let's carry on.
Took off when Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia tried to rent out a spare room with an air mattress to attendees of a conference because they realized all of the hotel rooms had been booked out. They called their service Air Bed and Breakfast, which was later shortened to the short stay app that you know and love or hate today. Airbnb is now worth more than hotel chains like Hilton and Wyndham combined. The company is by far the largest short-term rental company, and it has achieved excellent penetration into markets around the world where other similar peer-to-peer or network market apps like Uber, DoorDash, Lyft, and even Amazon have failed to take share away from local competition. It was a good idea. Customers loved it for giving them a cheaper alternative to outdated hotels, and hosts like the opportunity to earn extra income on a spare bedroom or even an entire separate property. But the four parties that make the short-term rental market work, the customers, the hosts, the public, and the platforms, are all now dealing with four unique problems that are threatening to undo this market and take out a lot of other real estate investments with it. The first problem lies with the people who it's hardest to feel sorry for, the hosts. Airbnb and other short-term rental platforms provided a unique opportunity for people to profit off real estate in a totally new way. Having a roommate existed long before Airbnb, but the platform let homeowners offer their spare rooms to travelers who could pay up to triple what a long-term roommate would pay, since budget was the reason that they were looking for a roommate instead of a place of their own. The extra income was nice, but the added flexibility of a short-term roommate was the biggest appeal to most people. If you had an extra bedroom to rent out in your apartment, you could find a long-term roommate. But then you run the risk that they are the type of person who is messy, loud, doesn't pay the rent on time, or is just a clash with your own personality. With a short-term tenant, any problems are only going to last as long as their short stay. Other advantages are that payments are handled through the Airbnb platform. There was a rating system that controlled bad behavior, and if you ever wanted the house to yourself because family was coming over or just wanted a quiet week to yourself, it was as easy as blocking out those dates on the app. That was the early value proposition of Airbnb. But sharing a spare room and staying with a random person while on vacation only appealed to a certain type of alternative traveler. Most people who Airbnb are putting up entire properties for guests to use as exclusive accommodations. Instead of a short-term alternative to a roommate, the market became a short-term, higher-yielding alternative to conventional long-term tenants in an investment property. Property owners could make as much as double the rent from short-term stays after paying Airbnb fees than they could from long-term rentals, even if their property was only rented out for half the year. The downside was that short-term rentals required more effort because the property needed constant cleaning between stays and there was less guarantee of consistent income. But financial benefits were still clearly in favor of short-term rentals for properties close to cities and tourist hotspots.
I mean, so far, really, he's just nailing all of it. This is just like all quite accurate.
Large-scale Airbnb landlords, the Airbnb barons if you will, designed properties with the express intention of cutting down on the effort required from them. They fitted doors with keypad locks that could be changed remotely between guests, easily cleanable surfaces, inexpensive but fashionable fittings, and preferred properties with minimal landscaping. All of this cut down on the additional efforts hosts needed to put into managing a property. But like all good things, it didn't last forever. Airbnb advertised its platform just as hard to new hosts as it did to guests, and investors started buying multiple homes to turn them into Airbnbs. Some hosts turned managing their Airbnb properties into a full-time job, effectively purchasing a job as a hotel general manager. Other hosts took an easier approach. Realtors in high tourist areas started offering short-term property management services where, just like they would manage traditional long-term tenants, the realtors would instead manage the short-term rentals with some services even handling the listing on Airbnb. Their fee was higher, but the higher short-term rental price meant owners still came out ahead. The additional cash flows from higher-yielding short-term rentals also made it easier to qualify for more home loans because the additional income could be used to pay for the loan on the next property and the next property.
That's not entirely true. That's difficult to do. So all of this has been really accurate so far. Honestly, like this is all accurate. And he's just nailing a lot of the benefits of short-term rental investing or short-term rental property management, which shameless plug, link in the description down below if you want to learn more about how to do that yourself. Guys, just want to take a quick break here to say that for those of you watching who want to build cash flow and long-term wealth by purchasing Airbnbs and short-term rental properties, there's a link in the description right down below for a free training that'll walk you through my exact strategy for investing successfully in Airbnbs. Now, if you're not ready to actually buy properties and you want to get started managing other people's properties on Airbnb the same way I got started and build a full-time income managing other people's properties, there's actually another free training linked in the description down below as well that'll be a really great fit for you. So whether you want to invest in short-term rental properties and actually build amazing cash flow and long-term wealth by acquiring the assets, buying the properties themselves, or you're looking to earn a full-time income managing other people's properties on Airbnb, we've got some awesome trainings that are linked in the description down below that'll definitely help you out. When you sign up for the trainings, we're also going to send you a few other tools and resources completely for free just to help you get started. Again, the links to sign up are in the description down below, and both trainings and all the tools are completely free. So make sure to register for the trainings, links in the description down below. The one thing so far that there's a bit of a caveat around is the home loans. So getting a home loan, qualifying for a mortgage on a property based on short-term rental income is something called a DSCR loan. It stands for debt service coverage ratio, and it's basically asset-based lending for short-term rental properties, where the lender is going to qualify the property based on its potential income as a short-term rental, as opposed to qualifying the borrower based on their personal income. So it's very similar to the way lending works on a large multi-residential property. If you're buying, let's say, a 10-unit property, the lender isn't looking at you, the buyer, and saying, okay, can you afford to pay the mortgage on this property? Because of course you're not going to be the one paying the mortgage on that property. It's 10 freaking units. You're obviously going to rent them out, get the rent roll to be covering it. So they're going to qualify the property based on its rent roll being able to cover the payments. That's a simplification of how that lending process works. Now, lending of that type for short-term rental properties is available, but it's much less common. So it's not quite as straightforward and simple as it's laid out here. And it's not available in all places. For example, in Canada, we can't do asset-based lending for short-term rental properties. To my knowledge, there just aren't any lenders that operate that way, because most lenders are more conservative and they view short-term rental income as being more volatile. So some lenders, especially in the US, have caught onto this, and they see, okay, there actually are ways to predict how well a short-term rental property is going to do, and so they are comfortable lending on them, but it's not quite as simple and straightforward as it's being portrayed in the video here.
The inevitable result was clear. For little additional effort, hosts could make more money from their properties, so the market became oversaturated and hosts started to struggle to rent out their properties enough to make it worthwhile.
Again, that's all speculation. If you actually look at the numbers, that right there, he just doesn't really have any numbers or data backing that up. Maybe if we watch a little further, he'll get to that. But here's where I think I'm going to start to have issue with the video. Like, yes, there is definitely a huge amount more supply of short-term rentals, but it's also become way more popularized amongst guests. So demand for short-term rental properties has risen dramatically over the years as well. And though it's true in anything, and literally anything, there's always going to be some people that are doing poorly, that don't know what they're doing. Like, for example, there are some people that are unemployed. There are some people that have a hard time at specific jobs. There's always a bottom quartile. There's always lower performers. There's always the middle that, that tends to be large, just doing okay. And then there's some outliers that are performing really well. And so on short-term rental, it's no different. If you don't know really what you're doing, if you don't have the right skills, the right expertise, then it can be challenging, or you can kind of be just more average and do okay. You're still going to probably do, in most markets, better than a long-term rental would. But if you do exceptional, if you really know what you're doing, then you can just run circles around long-term rental. And then if you put zero effort into it and have no clue what you're doing, and you buy on speculation, don't do analysis, all the things we talk about not doing and avoiding here on this channel, then obviously if you go the completely wrong way and essentially just YOLO the whole thing, then yeah, it's gonna be a disaster. But
short-term rentals also made long-term rentals more expensive, so the gap between what someone can make from...
So again, that's really, really tough to put a finger on. Best estimates from actual analysis that's been done on this is that short-term rentals have caused an increase in the average big metro area of like about a fraction of 1%. Sometimes you can speculate to say, like, you could expand to say that like maybe there's a 1% or a 1.5% increase in rent prices that's actually directly caused by short-term rentals taking up additional supply out of the market. And so if you look at that, that means that you're getting like, your rent is going up by $10 per $1,000 in rent that you're spending. Like, that is not what's making housing unaffordable. An extra $10 on your $1,000 a month rent payment, an extra $20 a month on your $2,000 a month rent payment, that's not what's making housing unaffordable. So that's why it just gets really, really tough, because a lot of people just go, okay, great. So Since 2008, rent prices have gone up dramatically. Since 2008, Airbnb has taken off dramatically. And they equate correlation to causation when in fact, that's like, one of the biggest mistakes that you can make when analyzing trends is that correlation does not equal causation. And if you actually dive into the numbers, the real causation relationship, it's very, very, very minimal.
From a short-term rental versus what they could make from a long-term rental is narrowing. For many hosts, it's no longer worth the additional risk and effort to rent out property short-term. And for the others that could only afford their loans because of the higher rent they got from the short-term rental yields, they might be forced to sell.
It's not really the case. Like I've seen very, very few, if any, markets where you suddenly can't make more as a short-term rental investor than as a long-term rental investor. You can almost right across the board, you can still make, 2, 3, 4 times more with your property being a short-term rental than as a long-term rental. But can you justify the purchase price? Will it actually cash flow? Well, you have to actually analyze a property to do that. Like if I buy $1 million property, I may be able to make $4,000 a month on that instead of $2,000 a month by having it be a short-term rental instead of a long-term rental. But making $4,000 a month with $1 million property still means that I'm going to be losing money after paying for the mortgage, utilities, the insurance, the property taxes, the cleaning fees, everything like that, right? So it doesn't, just because you can make more doesn't mean that you can actually justify the purchase. And so yes, certainly some people did speculate and they bought bad properties that they shouldn't have purchased. And I fully agree with that. A lot of people bought properties, especially over the last couple of years, that they just kind of, again, YOLO'd their money into and didn't do any kind of analysis. And they bought them like without any kind of a backup plan. And yeah, if you do that, then yes, you can be put in a really bad position where you can no longer afford those payments. But that's not the majority of people. That's just the speculators in the market, which in any market, there will be people that are not able to make the payments, that are not able to do things properly. Just like with long-term rental investors, there's a whole bunch right now that aren't able to make their payments. Just like with home buyers, people that purchase homes for themselves, there's a whole bunch of people right now that can't make the payments for themselves. And that has a lot more to do with the rising cost of real estate than it does how you're making money to cover the real estate payments.
First group in the collapsing market for short-term rentals, and they were one of only 2 that were in any way responsible for the shitstorm to begin with. So it's time to learn how money works to find out why short-term rentals got so big and failed so quickly.
Again, like that's a tough one there. That's like I forget what the correct debate term is for it. It's a hidden premise essentially, where he's saying that it collapsed so quickly as if that's factual when it hasn't actually collapsed, right? Like that's a hidden premise being snuck in there. He hasn't actually proved that it's collapsed because he can't, right? It hasn't.
Short-term rentals were a good solution to a real problem. Traditional hotels had become overpriced and didn't cater to what a lot of people really wanted when they went away on vacation. Hotels provide a lot of amenities like housekeeping, room service, restaurants, concierge desks, meeting rooms, gyms, spas, pools, valet parking, and 24-hour security. These services are nice, but they come at a price which is either directly baked into the price of a room or charged separately at a significant markup. These services also don't always align with what the vacation goers really want when traveling, which is a place that just feels like home in a different city. Airbnb cut out a lot of amenities that catered more towards business travelers and offered vacationers their own kitchen, multiple bedrooms for their children, and an element of privacy that couldn't be purchased at any hotel chain. It felt like a home away from home because in many cases, it was just someone's home. Airbnbs were also much cheaper, especially when sharing a larger home between multiple friends or family members who would all need to book their own separate rooms if they were staying at a hotel.
Again, I just want to emphasize, all of this is still completely true. I get the impression that he's saying that it was true and is not, but all this is literally still true. This is still the case. How are you going to get a hotel room with multiple bedrooms, with a whole home style privacy, with a full kitchen, all that? Like they're just not really available. It's not really what hotels do, what they cater towards. So you absolutely still do get that. And those are the properties that still tend to perform the best as short-term rentals, are not ones that compete with hotels, but ones that are just sort of in a different category altogether, where you get like all these amenities and whatnot, or all these additional benefits, I should say, not so much amenities, but like you get your own backyard, like you get a full kitchen, you get the bedrooms, you get the basement, like all these different things.
A study conducted by the University of Waterloo and Daniel Gutentag Hospitality Research surveyed customers booking Airbnbs in traditional hotels. The study found that 61% of all correspondents said that they chose the Airbnb as a budget-friendly alternative to even budget hotel chains. Despite the company's marketing as a way to share the vacation experience with a local host that can show you around a city, most respondents said that they did not care about this aspect of the service, and 70% stayed in a home that they had all to themselves, so they didn't have to share space with a random stranger. Despite people actually preferring not to share their short-term rental with a host, Airbnb still spends billions every year promoting this aspect of their service for a really important reason that will come up later.
I mean, Airbnb doesn't really promote that much. Like, they do promote whole home listings, and yeah, I get it. Like, they do have to a certain extent for like public perception, because they don't want the angry mobs of politicians and just people in general coming after them, and they want to portray themselves in a specific way, right? They want to portray themselves as like a home sharing platform because it's really, really attractive for a lot of people to go and attack Airbnb, and so they don't want to just hand that opportunity to people. I'll give you a couple examples. It's super, super attractive for hotel companies to go after Airbnb and try to get them killed by just saying, hey, they're killing affordable housing. They're not a whole home. They're not a home sharing platform. They're for whole home. They're driving up real estate prices. And why is the hotel company doing that? Is because they genuinely care about rising home prices and they're so philanthropic? No, of course not. It's because they want to decrease the competition to their business. They want to increase their profit. That's why they exist as a company, is to create profit for shareholders, just like any other company does. And sometimes the best way to build up your building and make it taller in the skyline is by taking out the bigger building that's already there, screaming over you. Like they said early in the video, Airbnb is larger as a company than the other major hotel companies in the world combined. So they have a lot to gain by just snapping and taking shots at their biggest competitor. Similarly, politicians, right? Why do they want to go after short-term rentals, and why do they tend to do that? Well, because the housing crisis is a really, really tough long-term problem to solve. There's going to have to be some really major systemic changes in order to actually change the housing crisis, make a dent there. So what's a politician to do? Well, a politician's incentive is in most cases to get reelected, and they have to be short-term. They have to be doing things that are catering to the people they want to get votes from. And so saying, hey, this is a huge issue that's going to take a decade to really fix, and we've got to go and do all this reform, that's a really big uphill battle for a politician to fight. They're probably not going to be able to point to any measurable progress they've made by the end of their term. Whereas if they say, look, let's ban short-term rentals, boom, right? It's not actually going to make an impact on housing prices, right? Like if you look at the major cities where they have done this, it's not like housing prices just suddenly drop through the floor and now everyone can afford housing. But the politician gets to stand up there and say, look what I did. I made a big difference because I made this happen. And they can actually make something happen relatively quickly and try to get reelected. So it's just, if you understand why people are going after the platform, you understand why it's important to Airbnb that they present themselves in a specific way. They're just playing the game, right? And that's not their fault.
Get an Airbnb and get a place to yourself.
Anyway, the things that made Airbnb are now either being lost or offered by competitors in 3 areas. The first is price. Airbnb is no longer an affordable alternative to budget hotels.
1000% they absolutely still are. Airbnb is almost always, virtually always less expensive than a hotel if you're traveling in a large group. It's almost always the case. And if you're traveling solo, it's a bit hit or miss, but it just depends on what you want. Honestly, when I travel solo, I often will still stay in a hotel. But when I'm traveling in a big group, no doubt about it, it's way more affordable and just way better to stay at an Airbnb or short-term rental than it is to stay at a hotel.
It is now a premium option competing with premium 5-star chains. According to the company's own data, even though the number of bookings has only increased 17% since 2019, the gross value of all bookings worldwide has increased by 67%. Airbnb is just not cheap anymore. The second area where the platform is losing out is its monopoly on homes away from home. Hotel chains have significantly increased their offerings of apartment-style accommodations that do away with typical hotel services in exchange for larger rooms with multiple sleeping areas and kitchens.
I don't know if any of you guys have stayed at like an apartment style hotel. That is nothing compared to an Airbnb. Now, sure, if you're comparing it to staying in like a condo Airbnb in a metro area, then sure, like they're kind of comparable. But if you're comparing it to staying in like a whole home listing, a single family home, it's nothing. And like, there's so many markets, the vast majority of markets out there where people are buying or managing short-term rental properties, there just aren't these options from hotels. Like, hotels are putting these options up where they already have hotels, which is in big major metro areas. But if you go out to like cottage country, you go by national parks, you go by, by these like more rural areas, good luck finding a hotel chain, let alone a hotel chain that has apartment style listings.
To many customers, these semi-serviced apartments offer a better value because they combine the known consistency of a hotel chain with the space and price of an Airbnb. The third area that turned customers against Airbnb was service. Hosts wanted to cut down on the work they needed to put into managing their properties, so they started putting more unrealistic expectations on guests about cleaning up before they leave.
Exorbitant cleaning fee, that will irk people, especially if you, the person staying there, has to pretty much clean the house themselves.
Overall, this is just a few bad hosts.
I mean, like, yes, there are fringe cases. Like, I've definitely seen posts about like hosts, asking the guests to like take out the garbage, wash all the sheets, clean the floors, like go above and beyond. But that's like, that's like what, maybe 1 or 2% of hosts, like the outliers that ever actually do that. And to boot, it's like, well, yeah, cleaning fees. So what? You would rather as a guest that your place not be clean before you get there. You'd rather just check into a place that the guest before you tidied it up before you, and then you're gonna sleep in the bed that they didn't wash the sheets properly on. You're gonna go and like use the kitchen where they didn't properly clean the dishes, and like absolutely not. So yes, guests do tend to like to just complain about the cleaning fee, but the reality is what they're saying is like, okay, I'll just clean it up when I leave. Well, yeah, but okay, are you okay with it not being clean before you get there? Well, obviously not. And so again, this is why like I think that Airbnb has a really good specific place where it makes a lot of sense. Like as a traveler, I'm not saying that I use them for every single time that I travel, but if I'm booking, a 5-night stay somewhere, that cleaning fee now becomes a lot less significant per night. So it's generally a lot more affordable to stay at an Airbnb or short-term rental than it is to stay at a hotel for anything longer than maybe 5 or 7 nights. And if I'm staying with a large group of people, again, it really decreases what the impact of that cleaning fee is for me. And so again, I'm going to stay at an Airbnb or short-term rental. If I'm going to a place for 1 night and I'm staying in a big city where there are really great hotel options available, and I'm only going for 1 night and I'm traveling solo or just with my partner, then yeah, sure, okay, I'll book a hotel room, because if I book an Airbnb, the cleaning fee, it significantly impacts my nightly rate. It's going to be a little bit more headache to get checked into the Airbnb generally than it is with the hotel. Less consistency, like there's reasons where it will make sense to book a hotel, but that doesn't mean that Airbnb is dead and it's all collapsing. It just means that there's room for both.
Few bad hosts, but it has given the platform a bad reputation amongst customers who expect to be charged cleaning fees on top of already high rates. Compared to a hotel, where as long as there is not permanent damage, housekeeping will handle everything free of charge.
No, they won't. It's baked right into the fee that you pay. If you think that you're getting housekeeping for free when you stay at a hotel, you're insane. Of course you're paying for it. They just don't separate it out because they don't need to. They have cleaners that are on staff. So there's not an actual, like they're paying the cleaner hourly regardless. So there's not an additional variable expense to them when you stay at the hotel, because they were gonna pay the cleaner anyway. So they don't have to bake it into that price like a separate fee. Whereas it's just really hard to price your cleaning, your cleaning into your nightly rates as an Airbnb host, because it's very variable, right? You're not paying a cleaner to be there on staff no matter what. You're not absorbing that cost either way. You're only paying that fee if a person stays. And you're paying the same amount to your cleaner whether the person stays for 1 night or 5 nights. So it just makes a lot more sense. It's way easier to manage pricing if you separate it out as an Airbnb host. But that doesn't mean that you're paying for cleaning with Airbnb and you're not paying for it with a hotel. It just means it's baked into the price with a hotel.
If Airbnb's business was being a middleman platform between hosts and guests, then both of these groups having a bad experience is not a good direction for the company. But there is another group that has had it work.
Which is, again, not actually happening. He hasn't demonstrated that's happening. That's all just it's a snuck premise there.
And who are involved in the app whether they like it or not. And that's a third reason for the Airbnb bust. The public is sick of it. Customers can choose to stay wherever they want, and the threat posed by Airbnb and other short-term rental options has forced existing hotels to improve their offerings. Hosts were investors who need to accept that all investing carries risk. Most of them still own a home or multiple homes that they can now lease out in an overpriced rental market or sell likely for a profit. Neither of these groups have lost, unless they were really stupid. The people who did lose, though, were priced out of their homes because it became more profitable to rent to vacationers than long-term residents who needed a place to live.
Again, that's just categorically not accurate based on actual analysis, because again, we just come back to the correlation and causation thing.
Poor renters don't have any power over the platform itself. But the problem of unaffordable homes in certain cities is becoming so bad that politicians are introducing new policies that will limit how many short-term rentals are allowed to exist and charging hosts additional taxes for running unregistered hotels.
Because again, politically, it makes a lot of sense for them to do that. Again, none of this is actually demonstrating here is a cause and effect relationship. And the reason that's important to recognize is because if you approach this by actually understanding what's truly going on, not what the headlines are saying, then you can navigate it, right? You can, for example, I only invest in markets where it's politically popular to keep Airbnb and short-term rentals around, because I know that I'm not going to run the risk of politicians choosing to get rid of them. How do you find areas where it's politically popular to keep Airbnb around? Well, you find markets where the local economy depends really heavily on short-term rentals, where that drives a lot of tourism and it actually helps and supports the local economy. And it is then politically really popular to have short-term rentals operating there. Things like that. It just, you're able to navigate things a lot better if you understand what's truly going on as opposed to just what the headlines are saying.
If hosts are not playing by the rules, this legislation will require platforms to take down those listings.
Other cities have just made short-term rentals illegal without the same licensing as a normal hotel, making it so expensive that it's not worth it for the hosts to bother. The other group cracking down on short-term rentals are the people who you would least expect to be the heroes in a story about housing: homeowners associations. Owners associations in apartments and suburbs that have them are blocking owners from renting out their homes to short-term stays because residents who live in their homes don't like loud parties and additional security risks that come with the short-term guests.
Yeah, I mean, that's just true. We just, again, don't buy properties in areas with HOAs because HOAs tend to be tricky to navigate. And it's like, who wants to buy a property for an investment anyway, where there's an association of people that get to just tell you on a moment's notice that what you can and can't do with the property? Who wants to invest in a property where you don't have control over even the color of the paint, the length of your grass, whether you can rent it short term, whether you can't? Why would you possibly want to invest in a property like that? Again, that just, to me, falls under the category you mentioned earlier of people that were being stupid.
Some hosts are simply ignoring these laws and taking the fines into account as a cost of doing business. A report from McGill University's urban planning professor David Walksmith found that 45% of all short-term rental listings in Los Angeles are illegal in one way or another, and that the city could have levied between $56.8 million and $302.2 million in fines in 2022 alone. The semi-legal approach to rentals is still working for some hosts, but it's creating problems for the platform. Airbnb is spending hundreds of millions of dollars across the world fighting legal battles for the right to operate, and that's why they still spend so much on advertising their service as a way to see a new city with a local host. Even though most of their properties are rented out as whole new homes where a guest will never even see the person that owns their home, it's much harder to regulate shared short-term stays because it's harder to distinguish them from someone just staying with their friend.
again, like all this is exactly what I said before around like they have a public perception they want to have for the reasons they do. And that's just the reality of having a multi-billion-dollar company. Like there's going to be legal battles. You need public perception to be good of you. Like, every multi-billion-dollar corporation goes through the exact same thing. Google, Apple, Amazon, like how much do you see them, fighting court battles, dealing with public perception issues? That's just the nature of being a Goliath company like they are.
The folksy image of someone sharing their bedroom with curious travelers who want to see a new city with a local is much better PR than a multimillionaire or institutional property investor who has just listed their 10th home with a tech company worth $80 billion. And that's the fourth cause of the Airbnb bust. The platform is losing its control on guests, hosts, and the general public.
I actually disagree. I think they're doing a great job of keeping it under control. Again, I don't see the proof of that last statement there.
Airbnb has always had competitors like VRBO, but now incumbent traveler sites like TripAdvisor, Booking.com, and Expedia are launching their own short-term rental platforms like Turnkey or incorporating them into existing sites that already aggregate listings from multiple hotel advisors.
Which again, like the video here is what you're talking about is the overdue collapse of short-term rentals, what he's saying. And what he's really talking about, that I still don't even agree with even in the slightest based on what's being presented here, is a collapse of Airbnb, one single platform, not of short-term rentals. Additional options for people to rent their property short-term, additional, marketing methods, basically marketing platforms for your short-term rental. Like pointing to that is not really, it just doesn't equate to, okay, short-term rentals are dying because there's more ways to grow your short-term rental business. There's more ways to market your short-term rental. No, that's actually making things way better. You can not be less platform dependent. You get more exposure. It's actually really beneficial to short-term rentals that like VRBO and Expedia and Booking.com and these other platforms are starting to adopt and give options for short-term rental hosts.
Airbnb charges a host fee of 3% to the people listing their properties and a service fee of 14% to guests. Some hosts have found it cheaper to advertise their properties through local agencies and split these savings with guests. Airbnb has about the same amount of technical overhead for a vacation stay as Uber has for food delivery or rideshare. But Uber can only make a few dollars off a small charge, where Airbnb can make hundreds of dollars from their 17% cut of every transaction. This has made the platform profitable where other peer-to-peer platforms have struggled to turn a profit, which is a great advantage in today's high interest rate environment, but it is also painted a target on the back of the company that has no competitive moat around their business model. Apart from their brand name and recognition, there is nothing to stop these new entrants entering the marketplace.
If you know really basically anything about business and growth startups, like that's an insane statement to make that Airbnb doesn't have a moat around their business in any way, aside from their brand name and recognition. Well, that's a pretty big asterisk. The whole value of a platform like Airbnb is that I, as a host, it's a marketplace. It's a network effect that happens there. I, as a host, want to put my property there because there's a bunch of guests. I can go and put my property on Wimdu, but no one actually books their stays through Wimdu, so I don't get bookings there, so I'm not going to go to Wimdu. Similarly, as a guest, I want to go where there's a lot of variety of properties. So I can go to Wimdu as a guest, but I'm not going to because no one lists their properties there and there's very little variety. So the value of the platform is largely based on how many users it has on both sides of the equation. If there's a lot of hosts, then lots of guests want to come there. If there's a lot of guests, then lots of hosts want to come there. And it's a really great feedback loop once you're growing a platform like Airbnb. It's a really hard feedback loop to get going because you have that chicken and the egg problem. Like guests don't want to go there when there aren't hosts and hosts don't want to go there when there aren't guests. And Airbnb has gotten past that huge barrier to entry that other platforms just really haven't gotten the same kind of momentum with. And so absolutely there's a huge competitive advantage for Airbnb. Crazy to say it there isn't.
From taking market share away from Airbnb by offering a better service or charging lower fees. The bonus fifth reason behind the Airbnb...
And even if competition is getting fierce for Airbnb, which again, I don't believe that it is, like, yes, it's heating up, like VRBO is getting better and getting more popular, but it's not even close to being what Airbnb is. But even if that does happen, even if Airbnb as a company completely collapses, that doesn't mean the collapse of short-term rentals. It means the collapse of one single OTA.
and bust was that the platform was never set up with longevity in mind. It has made billions in just a few years, and for its founders and early investors, everything else is just a bonus. That's not a bad thing, but if you're interested in businesses that have a bit more staying power, go and watch my video over on how history works.
So again, saying that the company wasn't built with longevity in mind, I don't know where he's getting that from. That's crazy. Like, again, that's just pure, like, I don't even know where he's getting that from. Like, that's just pure speculation, guesswork, just sneaking that in again. So again, I think that a lot of what's covered in this video has just like no actual basis in reality. But let me know what you think. Like, let me know in the comment section down below if you liked this video, if you thought it was valuable, if you thought it was helpful, if it helps you just better understand what's going on with Airbnb and short-term rentals and the whole Airbnb bust conversation, all that. Let me know by just hitting the like button. If you did like the video, give it a thumbs up. It really does help me out tremendously with growing these videos and getting them in front of more people. And yeah, last but not least, if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel and you want to do that, just make sure you hit the subscribe button down below, because we post 2 new videos every single week here on the channel, helping you to succeed with short-term rental investing, property management, hosting, everything in the world of short-term rentals, navigating this imminent and overdue collapse. We help you with all of it. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.